The first thing Maya Lewis noticed when she stepped off the bus was how the air smelled like rain and soil, clean and stubborn. The kind of scent that clings to your clothes long after you leave. Vermont in early April wasn't exactly gentle. The wind cut through her denim jacket as she hoisted the duffel bag over her shoulder, steadying herself while her son tried to chase a paper cup tumbling down the empty road. "Eli, stay close," she called. The boy stopped mid, clutching his small stuffed rabbit to his chest. He was 8, all elbows, quiet eyes, and the kind of mind that lived in its own weather. The doctors had called it mild autism, as if that could ever describe how he saw the world now. He just nodded, staring at the rows of bare trees ahead. "They look like they're waiting," he murmured. Maya smiled faintly. "For spring, maybe." He tilted his head. "Or for someone to talk to them." The house on Maple Hill wasn't hers. Not yet, not really. It belonged to the Carter estate, an old white farmhouse that looked both tired and proud. Peeling paint, a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Behind it stretched acres of neglected garden, tangled vines, overgrown hedges, flower beds, choked with weeds. Maya had seen the listing online. Live-in groundskeeper needed. Cottage on property included. Flexible hours. Background check required. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stability. And stability, for a single mother, was as rare and precious as peace. When the truck pulled up the gravel drive, she straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. A man stepped out, tall, early 40s maybe, with the kind of tired confidence that didn't need to prove itself. His hair was dark, flecked with grey, and his shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows. "Maya Lewis?" he asked. "Yes, sir." He smiled faintly. "Nathan Carter. You spoke with my assistant." "Oh," she hesitated. "I didn't realize you'd be here in person." "Neither did I." His tone was dry, but not unkind. "The agency usually handles this sort of thing. But the garden," he glanced toward the wild sprawl behind the house, "needed someone who gives a damn." Maya followed his gaze. The place was beautiful, even in ruin. Lilac bushes strangled by ivy, roses gone wild, stone paths cracked open by roots. "I give a damn," she said softly. He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Let's hope so." Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and old paper, the kind of scent that came from years of keeping people's lives tucked away in drawers and shelves. Nathan led her through the kitchen, all oak and light, to the back door, where the view opened onto the fields. "My late parents started this garden 30 years ago," he said. "They believed everything could be fixed with patience and pruning, and you don't." Maya asked. He gave a short laugh. "I'm a novelist. I fix things by making them worse first." Something in his voice told her that joke wasn't really a joke. They walked the property together. She listened as he described the old irrigation lines, the greenhouse that hadn't been opened in years, the maple trees that bordered the pond. When they reached the edge of the property, Maya crouched beside a patch of earth where something green pushed through the soil. She brushed away dead leaves. "Daffodils," she murmured. "They always find a way." Nathan watched her quietly. "You sound like someone who knows what that means." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "Maybe I do." By sunset, the job was hers. He handed her a set of keys and a folded note with a phone number. "The cottage is behind the barn. It's small, but the heat works. Call if you need anything." Maya nodded, tucking the keys into her pocket. "Thank you, Mr. Carter." "Nathan," he corrected. We're not that formal out here. Then Maya, she said, smiling. His expression softened, the first unguarded moment she'd seen. Welcome to Maple Hill, Maya. That night, after Eli fell asleep, she stood on the porch of the small cottage, watching the fireflies blink over the dark fields. The air was cool, smelling faintly of lilac and smoke from someone's distant fireplace. For the first time in a long while, she let herself exhale. Maybe this wasn't just another temporary stop. Maybe this was the beginning of something that could last, a season where things might actually grow again. She looked out at the garden's silhouette, wild, broken, waiting, and whispered to the night, I promise I'll take care of you. The first morning on Maple Hill broke grey and cold, the kind of spring day that still carried winter's breath. Maya woke early, the sound of rain tapping lightly against the cottage roof. Steady and soft, Eli was still asleep, curled up with his stuffed rabbit. The quiet gave her a rare moment to breathe, to stretch her fingers and feel the ache of work she hadn't even begun. By 6, she was outside, boots sinking slightly into the wet ground, gloves tucked into her jacket pocket. The rain had slowed to a mist, enough to see the garden's shape, rows of long-forgotten beds, a half-collapsed trellis, the faint memory of something that once thrived here. She knelt beside a patch of tangled weeds and dug her fingers into the earth. Cold, dense, alive, morning. A voice called from behind her. Nathan stood on the porch, a mug in hand, his hair damp from the drizzle. You're up early, he said. She smiled faintly. You said the garden needed someone who gives a damn. That usually starts before breakfast. He chuckled softly and stepped off the porch, walking toward her. Coffee? She hesitated for a beat before taking it. Thanks. He nodded toward the ground. You're digging blind, you know. Half the irrigation lines under there are broken. My father installed them himself, badly. Then we'll fix them, she said simply. He looked at her, rain catching on his eyelashes. You really think this place can be saved? She met his eyes. I don't think anything that's loved stays ruined forever. By mid-morning, Eli had joined her, his rain boots splashing through puddles, his little hands clutching a bucket of seed packets she'd found in the shed. What are we planting? He asked. Well, Maya said, brushing hair from his forehead, we have to see what's still alive first. He nodded solemnly, crouching to watch a worm wriggle through the dirt. He's still alive. She smiled. Then that's a start. Nathan watched from a few yards away, leaning against the porch post. He hadn't expected the sight to move him. A mother and her boy reclaiming a forgotten patch of land, but something about it hit deeper than he liked to admit. Later that day, they shared lunch at the kitchen table, soup, bread, and the kind of comfortable silence that happens only between people who've been alone too long. Nathan broke it first. You mentioned you were a teacher. I was, she said, before she paused, before Eli's diagnosis. The hours got complicated. The world got smaller. He nodded, not pressing. You seem good with quiet. She smiled faintly. Quiet doesn't scare me. It's the noise I can't handle sometimes. He looked down at his bowl. Funny, I used to think silence meant failure. That if no one was reading my books, I was disappearing. And now I'm not sure disappearing sounds so bad. She tilted her head. You don't seem like someone who'd fade easy. He gave her a small, almost self-conscious smile. You'd be surprised. The rain didn't stop for 3 days. By the third morning, the garden was a mirror, puddles reflecting the grey sky, petals trembling on half-dead branches. Maya spent the time inside the greenhouse, clearing cobwebs and sweeping broken glass from the floor. The scent of damp earth filled the air. It felt like stepping into someone else's memory. Eli wandered between the rows, tracing the names still written on wooden tags: lavender, hydrangea, basil. He sounded them out carefully, as if learning a language no one spoke anymore. When the door opened, Maya looked up. Nathan stood there, holding 2 thermoses. "Rain check," he said, smiling wryly. "Couldn't let you freeze out here alone." She accepted the drink, feeling the warmth through her gloves. "I didn't think you were the kind to check on people." "I'm not," he admitted. "You make it look easy, being stubborn." "Being steady," he said. "I forgot what that looks like." They talked more than they should have that afternoon, about books, about Eli, about how strange it felt to start over at an age when most people were already settled. When she laughed, really laughed, he realized it had been months since he'd heard that sound in his house. And when she looked up, meeting his gaze through the misted glass, he realized something else. The garden wasn't the only thing beginning to come back to life. That night, Maya found Eli asleep on the couch, his fingers still smudged with dirt, a handful of wildflower seeds clutched in his palm. She tucked a blanket around him, brushing a curl from his forehead. From the window, she could see the outline of the main house, a single light still burning in Nathan's study. He was probably writing again. Or maybe, like her, he was just sitting there, thinking about how strange it was that broken things had a way of finding each other. Outside, the rain finally stopped, and in the silence after the storm, something small and green pushed through the earth. By mid-May, the garden had begun to breathe again. The rain was less frequent now, and the air carried the scent of wet grass and lilac. Tiny shoots had pushed through the dirt in uneven rows, not perfect, but stubbornly alive. Every morning, Maya walked the rows before breakfast, her boots leaving soft impressions in the soil. Eli trailed behind her, counting the sprouts under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. He hesitated, eyes squinting. "That one's crooked." Maya crouched beside him. "That's okay. Sometimes crooked things grow stronger. They reach for light differently." He nodded, thoughtful. "Like people." She smiled. "Exactly like people." Nathan had taken to joining them some mornings, not to help exactly, but to stand on the porch with a mug of coffee, pretending not to watch. He told himself it was habit, curiosity even. But the truth was simpler. It had become the only part of the day that felt like anything. When Maya waved at him, he lifted the mug slightly in reply. "You're out early again," she grinned. "Plants don't sleep in," he chuckled. "Neither do writers with deadlines." "You're writing again?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Trying to." The words come slow. "That's how you know they matter," she said softly. Her voice lingered longer than she did. Later that week, Maya took Eli into town for groceries. The town of Belmar was small, one main street, a library that doubled as the post office, a diner that smelled of syrup even after closing. People noticed newcomers here, Mrs. Grant. The woman at the farmer's market gave her a curious smile. "You're the one staying up at Carter's place, aren't you?" Maya nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am. I'm helping with the garden. Well, it's about time someone did." That place used to win ribbons at the county fair back in the day. Nathan's mother, God rest her soul, had hands like magic. Maya smiled faintly. Maybe some of that magic's still in the soil. Mrs. Grant leaned closer, lowering her voice. You be gentle with that man, dear. He's lost more than he'll ever admit. Maya blinked, startled. I didn't mean, oh, I know, the woman said kindly. But sometimes hearts need tending, same as gardens. That afternoon, Nathan found her kneeling in the greenhouse, replanting the herbs she'd bought. The air smelled of basil and mint, sharp and sweet. Those from town? He asked. Market day, she said, without looking up. The woman selling them gave me advice about you. He raised an eyebrow. Oh, she said to be gentle. Nathan froze. Did she, now? Maya smiled without turning. Don't worry. I told her I don't do gentle. He laughed quietly, the sound soft and genuine. I believe that. Good, she said. You shouldn't hire a gardener who's afraid of pruning. In the evenings, she and Eli would sit on the cottage steps, reading aloud until the light faded. Sometimes Nathan would appear at the edge of the porch, pretending to check the mailbox just to listen. One night, when Maya looked up, she found him watching them, not intrusively, but with a quiet ache that made her chest tighten. Come sit, she said. He hesitated. I didn't want to interrupt. You're not. She patted the step beside her. Eli's reading about whales. The boy looked up, excited. They talk to each other under the water, but you can't hear them unless you dive deep enough. Nathan sat down slowly. That sounds about right. Right about what? Eli asked. He smiled faintly. Most things worth hearing, you have to dive for them. Maya glanced at him then, eyes soft, something unspoken passing between them. For a moment, it didn't feel like two adults and a child sitting under the fading sky. It felt like the beginning of a family that didn't know it was becoming one. A week later, the first flowers bloomed, small, uneven bursts of color along the path. Maya took photos to send to her sister, but never pressed send. It felt private, sacred, like the garden was hers and no one else's. Nathan noticed the change too. He started eating breakfast on the porch instead of his study, leaving the door open to hear their laughter from the yard. When Maya caught him one morning, she raised an eyebrow. You realize that's my garden soundtrack you're eavesdropping on? He smiled. Best writing playlist I've ever had. She shook her head, laughing. You really need to get out more. He looked at her for a beat. Maybe I already am. The words hung there, lighter than air, heavier than truth. That night, it rained again. Maya woke to the sound and stepped outside barefoot, letting the drizzle soak her hair. The garden glimmered under the porch light, every leaf trembling. Alive, Nathan appeared in the doorway, holding a towel. You'll catch a cold. She turned, smiling. Rain's part of the job. Doesn't mean you have to stand in it. She shrugged. Sometimes you do, so the roots know you're still here. He watched her for a long moment. This woman who'd come to fix his garden and was somehow fixing everything else, too, when she finally walked past him into the house. Brushing rain from her face, she said quietly, "Good night." Nathan, he wanted to say something back, stay, maybe, thank you, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he just stood there, listening to the sound of rain and realizing how much he didn't want it to stop. By June, Vermont had turned unpredictable, the kind of month that could start with sunlight and end in thunder. The garden was thriving, but so was the tension in the air. Storm clouds had been gathering all week, thick and low, heavy with waiting. Nathan noticed the change before Maya did. He'd lived here long enough to read the sky the way others read a book, the bruise-colored horizon, the sudden stillness in the air, the quiet before the wind began to whisper. "You might want to cover the seedlings tonight," he said one afternoon. Leaning on the fence, Maya wiped sweat from her forehead. "It'll pass," he frowned. "You've got farmer optimism. I've got single mum optimism," she said lightly. "If I waited for good weather, nothing would ever grow." He almost smiled. Fair point. By evening, the wind had picked up. The fields shivered in waves, and the first drops of rain hit the porch like scattered coins. Maya was still outside, pulling tarps over the beds when Nathan came running from the house. "You shouldn't be out here," he shouted over the wind. She secured the last knot and turned toward him, hair plastered to her face. "I'm almost done." Lightning split the sky, a white flash that made the world hold its breath. "Maya," he yelled, grabbing her arm just as thunder crashed overhead. For a moment, the two of them stood under the torrent, soaked, hearts pounding, rain blurring the line between fear and something else entirely. He pulled her toward the porch, half laughing, half angry. "You're insane." She laughed breathlessly. "You hired me for that." They stumbled through the door, dripping water onto the wooden floor, faces too close, breaths uneven. For one dangerous second, everything felt still, the storm outside fading into the background as if the world had narrowed to just them. Nathan's voice dropped. "You could have been hurt." Her smile faltered. "You don't get to worry about me, Nathan." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or something deeper. "Maybe I already do." She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time, didn't look away. The thunder cracked again, breaking whatever spell hung between them. Eli's voice called from the cottage. "Mum." Maya pulled back instantly, heart still pounding. "I should check on him." Nathan nodded, stepping aside. "Go." She paused at the door, then turned. "Thanks for pulling me in." He gave a small, crooked smile. Someone has to make sure the stubborn gardener survives the season. The storm raged all night. Rain hammered the windows, wind shook the trees, and lightning painted the hills in flashes of ghostly white. Maya lay awake, listening to the sound of it, half comforted, half afraid. Eli slept beside her, murmuring softly in his dreams, one hand clutching his rabbit. When the power went out, the cottage fell into darkness, only the faint glow of the fireplace left. She thought of Nathan in the big house alone, of the look in his eyes when he'd said he worried about her. Something in her chest ached. She'd built walls around her heart, thick, careful ones, but storms had a way of finding the cracks. Morning came pale and quiet. The air smelled of rain and turned to earth. When Maya stepped outside, the damage hit her like a slow ache. Several beds had flooded. The greenhouse door hung open, glass shattered. Rows of newly sprouted herbs lay flattened under debris. She knelt in the mud, numb. "No." Eli came running behind her, stopping short. "Mummy." "It's okay, baby," she said softly, though it wasn't. "We'll fix it." Her hands trembled as she lifted broken stems, pressing them gently back into the soil like a prayer. She didn't hear Nathan approach until his shadow fell over her, I'm sorry, he said quietly. It's not your fault. She replied without looking up. He crouched beside her. You worked so hard. So did they, she whispered. And they still broke. He hesitated, then touched her shoulder. We'll start again. She finally looked at him. You really think we can fix everything, Nathan? He held her gaze. No, but maybe that's not the point. Her throat tightened. Then what is? Trying, he said simply. Together, that word together, lingered long after the clouds cleared. In the days that followed, Nathan worked beside her every morning. He rebuilt the greenhouse frame, repaired the irrigation line, hauled soil until his hands blistered. They didn't talk about what had almost happened during the storm. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full, comfortable, careful, charged. Sometimes, while they worked, Eli would hum softly to himself, a tune he made up, something that sounded like hope. And when Maya caught Nathan smiling at the sound, she realized the truth she'd been avoiding. This garden wasn't just growing things. It was growing people one evening. When the sun returned, the three of them sat by the pond, the air smelling of grass and rain and clean beginnings. Eli skipped a stone across the water and looked up at Nathan. Did you ever get scared when you were little? Nathan smiled faintly. All the time. What did you do? He thought for a long moment. Found someone brave and stayed close. Eli looked at his mother, then nodded as if that made perfect sense. Maya felt her throat tighten. That's good advice. Nathan's eyes met hers. It's the only kind I have. That night, as fireflies blinked over the garden, Maya whispered a promise to the dark, not just to the plants, but to herself. Even if the storms come back, I'll keep planting. And somewhere inside the main house, Nathan wrote his first new sentence in almost 2 years. Some things don't need saving. They just need someone to believe they can grow again. By July, the world had turned green again. The storms were a memory now, just the smell of wet earth that still lingered when the wind shifted. Maya stood on the porch, watching sunlight spill over the hills. The lilies had bloomed, pale yellow. Bending gently under the weight of morning dew, Eli was on the grass with his sketchbook, drawing the garden the way he saw it, big, bright, full of life. Do you think they remember the rain? He asked suddenly, without looking up. Maya smiled. Maybe, but I think they remember the light more. He nodded, satisfied with that answer. Behind them, the front door creaked. Nathan stepped out, sleeves rolled, tie loose. The faint smell of coffee following him. You're up early, he said, voice warm. I could say the same, she teased. Author's hours aren't supposed to start before noon. He laughed softly. I've been rewriting the same sentence for 3 days. Thought maybe the garden could help. It usually does, she said, glancing back at him. You just have to listen to the plants. To yourself. He met her gaze, then steady, curious, maybe a little unguarded. I'm still learning how. Good, she said. So am I. That weekend, the town of Belmar held its annual summer fair. An old tradition full of music stalls and children with sticky fingers and painted faces. Maya hadn't planned on going. Crowds made Eli anxious, and she didn't like drawing attention. But Nathan had shown up that morning with 3 tickets in his hand. Non-negotiable, he'd said, grinning. Consider it research. Every writer needs to study joy. So now they stood in the middle of the main street, surrounded by the smell of kettle corn and lemon pie. the distant laughter of kids spinning on a carousel. Eli clutched her hand tight, eyes wide. "It's loud," he whispered. "I know, sweetheart," she murmured, kneeling beside him. "We can stay on the quiet side, okay? Near the flowers." Nathan pointed toward a row of vendor booths by the park. "There's a garden competition. You might actually like that one." Eli nodded slowly, and they walked together, 3 people moving like one small, imperfect family dot at the park. Rows of flowers lined long wooden tables, dahlias, hoses, hydrangeas, and 100 kinds of lilies. Maya stopped in front of one particular display, pale yellow lilies, identical to the ones from the Carter garden. She leaned closer, tracing the edge of a petal. "They're beautiful," she whispered. Nathan watched her, something thoughtful in his expression. "My mother used to enter the fair every year," he said quietly. "Same flowers." Maya looked up. "Lilies?" He nodded. "She said they were the only flower that bloomed for both weddings and funerals. The kind that doesn't choose what it stands for, it just keeps showing up." "That's poetic," she said softly, "and sad." He smiled faintly. She was both. Maya studied his face, then the soft lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind of grief that doesn't fade, just finds a quieter place to live. "I didn't know," she said gently, "about her. Most people don't ask." "I'm not most people." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment the fair, the noise, the crowd all blurred into background. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." They spent the afternoon wandering between stalls. Eli won a small stuffed fox at the ring toss. Maya bought homemade jam from a woman with a laugh that filled the whole tent. Nathan carried everything, tickets, prizes, bags, without complaint. When the sun began to sink, the 3 of them sat on a grassy hill overlooking the fairgrounds. The lights below glowed golden against the coming dusk. Eli had fallen asleep on Maya's lap, his fingers still clutching the fox. Nathan handed her a folded piece of paper. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this," he said. She frowned slightly, taking it. "What is it?" He hesitated. "A letter I never sent." She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. The first line made her breath catch. "Mum, I planted your lilies again today. I thought they'd die this time. They didn't." The letter went on, short, raw, unpolished. A son talking to his mother through soil and silence. When Maya looked up, Nathan was staring at the horizon. "I wrote it the week before I met you," he said quietly. "I guess I just wanted to tell someone that the garden didn't end with her." Her voice trembled. "You just did." He met her eyes then, and for a heartbeat there was nothing between them but understanding, deep, unspoken, real. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For staying," he said, "even when things looked dead." She smiled through tears. "That's how you know they're worth saving." That night, back at the house, Maya placed a single lily on the windowsill of her cottage. Outside, the fireflies had returned, blinking softly over the dark fields. She whispered into the quiet, half to herself, half to him. "Here's to the things that keep blooming." Even after, and somewhere in the main house, Nathan sat by his desk, staring at the letter again, this time not with grief, but with something that finally looked like peace. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, he hoped it would look like this: a boy laughing in the grass, a woman smiling at the light, and a garden that finally knew it had been found. The days after the fair felt slower, softer, like the whole world had exhaled. The heat came steady now, not cruel, just heavy enough to make the air shimmer above the fields. In the afternoons, the sound of crickets filled the yard, and Maya often found herself by the pond with Eli, watching dragonflies dip across the water. He liked to name them. "That one's copper," he'd say, "and that one's fast." She would smile, content to let his world shape itself however it wanted. Sometimes, from the porch, she could see Nathan watching, a book forgotten on his lap. His gaze turned toward them like he was memorizing something he knew he'd miss if he blinked. One evening, after Eli had gone to bed, Maya walked down to the pond alone. The moon was up, a thin curve of silver trembling on the water. She'd brought her pruning shears, intending to trim the overgrown lilies along the edge, but instead she just stood there, listening to the frogs sing. The sound was lonely and comforting all at once. Can't sleep either. She turned. Nathan was there, barefoot, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You move quiet," she said. "Taking one comes with writing about ghosts," he said. Smiling faintly, they stood in silence for a while, side by side, the night air cool against their skin. "Eli's doing better," he said finally. "I heard him reading aloud this morning." Maya nodded. "He likes when you're around. He says you make the air quieter." Nathan looked surprised. "Is that good?" For him, it's everything. He studied her profile, the way moonlight touched her cheek. "You do that too, you know." "Do what?" "Make the noise stop." The conversation lingered there, gentle, careful. Then Maya asked the question that had been circling in her mind for weeks. "You ever think about starting over after losing someone?" Nathan's expression changed, not closed, exactly, but fragile. "Every day. My ex-wife left before my mother died. She said I was already gone long before she packed her things. Maybe she was right." Maya swallowed. "You loved her." He hesitated. "I loved who we were supposed to be, not who we became." She nodded slowly, tracing the rim of her mug. "I understand that." He glanced at her. "What about Eli's father?" Her shoulders stiffened, then relaxed. "He left before Eli was born. We were young. He said he couldn't handle the responsibility, and you." "I handled it," she said simply, "because someone had to." He looked down, voice low. "You shouldn't have had to do it alone." She smiled, not bitter, just tired. "Life doesn't wait until we're ready. It just happens, like weeds and rain." Nathan chuckled softly. "That's a gardener's philosophy if I've ever heard one. Better than a writer's." She teased. "Maybe the same thing," he said. "We both try to make meaning out of mess." They walked along the pond's edge, the grass cool under their feet. The night smelled of lilies and damp earth, of things still growing in the dark. Maya stopped suddenly, looking out across the water. "You ever notice how the pond clears after a storm?" He followed her gaze. "The mud settles. It takes time, but the water finds itself again. Do you think people can do that too?" "I hope so," he said. "Otherwise we're just mud pretending to be reflection." She laughed quietly. "That's the kind of line that belongs in one of your books." "Maybe I'll save it for this chapter," he murmured. Their eyes met, brief, unguarded. For a moment, the air between them felt fragile enough to break and sacred enough not to. When they turned back toward the house, the porch light was still on. Fireflies glowed along the path, flickering like tiny hearts trying to remember their rhythm. At the steps, she paused. "Thank you for being here tonight," he nodded. "Thank you for letting me." Something passed between them, a quiet understanding that whatever this was, it was still growing, slow and careful. Like roots beneath soil, she turned to go inside, then stopped. "Nathan, yeah. Don't stop writing," she said softly. "Even if it hurts." He smiled, the kind that didn't reach his mouth but lived in his eyes. "Only if you don't stop planting." She nodded once, then disappeared into the warm glow of the cottage. Nathan stood there a long while, watching the light through her window, the outline of her moving behind the curtains, and thought to himself that maybe the hardest part of healing wasn't believing things could grow again, but believing they could grow this beautifully. September came slowly that year, dressed in gold and wind. The air turned crisp. The mornings smelled of wood smoke and wet leaves. The garden, once wild and green, had mellowed into something quieter, heavy with the scent of ripening apples and drying hay. Maya woke early as always, but now her days carried a different rhythm. She made coffee in Nathan's kitchen instead of her cottage. Eli waited for the bus at the end of the lane with his new backpack, a bright orange one he'd chosen himself, while Nathan lingered by the porch, pretending not to watch him go. The house had changed. Not in furniture or walls, but in atmosphere. There was laughter now, the sound of small feet, the smell of bread baking. A jacket draped over the back of a chair that wasn't there before. It no longer felt like a place waiting to be filled. It felt lived in that Saturday. They held their first harvest. Maya and Eli picked the last of the tomatoes from the vines, their hands stained red and green. Nathan helped carry baskets of herbs to the porch. The whole scene looked like something out of a painting, sunlight through maple leaves, the hum of bees, the easy warmth of people who'd learned how to be around each other without pretending. Eli knelt beside the garden bed, examining a crooked carrot he'd pulled up. "It's funny looking," he said. Nathan crouched beside him. "So am I some days." Eli giggled. "You don't have leaves." "Not yet," Nathan said, deadpan. "Give it time." Maya shook her head, laughing. "You, too, are impossible." Nathan looked up at her, smiling. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It's exhausting," she teased. In a good way. He leaned back on his hands, squinting at the sky. "That's how I'd describe you." Maya rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed anyway. That night, they cooked together, roasted vegetables, warm bread, and cider that Nathan had bought from town, the kitchen filled with light and steam. Music played low from the radio, an old jazz tune that crackled through the speakers. Eli danced clumsily, spinning in socks on the wooden floor. Maya joined him, laughing. Nathan watched for a moment, then let himself be pulled into the circle, awkward and smiling. The sound of their laughter louder than the rain that had begun to fall outside. It was the kind of night you didn't plan, the kind you realized too late you'd remember forever. Later, after Eli had gone to bed, Maya stepped outside with a blanket around her shoulders. The rain had stopped. The air was cool and silver under the harvest moon. Nathan followed, 2 mugs of cider in his hands. "You really can't sit still, can you?" She smiled softly. "It's too beautiful to sleep through." He handed her a mug. "To survival." She raised an eyebrow. "You toast like someone who's seen war." He met her gaze. I have. Just not the kind people write songs about. They drank in silence, the sound of the river faint in the distance. I used to hate this time of year, he admitted. It always felt like an ending. My mother died in October. Maya turned to him, gentle. I didn't know. I don't talk about it much. The garden was hers. Every fall, it felt like losing her all over again. Maya reached out, brushing his sleeve lightly. And this year? He looked at her, eyes soft. This year feels different. How so? Because she'd love you, he said simply. She'd say, you brought the light back. The words landed softly, without drama, just truth. Maya felt tears rise before she could stop them. Kind of you. It's not kindness, he said quietly. It's recognition. They sat there until the candles burned low, until the moon climbed high and the fields shimmered like water. When she finally stood to go, Nathan caught her wrist gently. Maya, he said, voice rough, almost unsure. She turned. Yes, he hesitated, searching for the right words. I don't want to ruin what this is, but I also don't want to keep pretending I don't. She placed a hand on his chest, stopping him. Nathan, he froze. Not tonight, she whispered. Please. Let it stay simple a little longer. He nodded slowly, exhaling. Okay. But as she turned to walk back to her cottage, she looked over her shoulder once more. I didn't say never. He smiled, the kind that felt like sunrise breaking through fog. Later. Alone in his study, Nathan opened his journal and wrote, She said not tonight, but the garden knows every season is only waiting for the courage to begin again. And outside, under the harvest moon, the lilies swayed in the breeze, as if agreeing that some promises don't need to be spoken to be real. By late October, the mornings turned silver, the fields glittered with a thin layer of frost that melted as soon as the sun rose. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke and something else, the beginning of stillness. Maya woke before dawn most days, lighting the fire in the cottage before Eli stirred. She'd wrap herself in Nathan's old flannel and step outside with her coffee, watching her breath mix with the mist. The garden looked different now, not dying, exactly, just resting. The lilies had bowed their heads, the leaves had gone brittle under her fingers. There was beauty in it, even in decay. Nathan joined her, sometimes, quiet as the sunrise. He didn't say much, just handed her a mug, shoulder brushing hers as they stood together in the cold. For people who'd spent years living in the noise of survival, silence had become its own kind of language. Eli loved the fall. He'd run through piles of leaves until his cheeks flushed pink, laughing, his voice echoing across the yard. One afternoon, while Maya was pruning the last of the hydrangeas, she heard Nathan's voice from the porch, calm but urgent. Maya, he called. He's not here. Her pruning shears slipped. What? Eli, he was playing by the barn 5 minutes ago. Her heart lurched. He wouldn't have gone far. They split up, Nathan heading toward the woods, Maya running across the field, calling her son's name, Eli. Honey, it's getting dark. No answer. Just the wind, whispering through the tall grass. Panic rose sharp and fast in her chest. The kind she'd learned to swallow since the day she became a mother. But this time it clawed its way up anyway, Eli. Then, faintly, a voice. Mum. Maya turned toward the sound. There, by the pond, Eli stood on the bank, soaked up to his knees, clutching something small in his hands. She ran to him, kneeling in the mud. Sweetheart, What are you doing? You scared me. He held up a turtle, tiny and shivering. He fell in the cold water. I was helping him. Maya's breath caught, part relief, part tears. Oh, baby. She pulled him into her arms. Nathan appeared moments later, breathless. Worry etched into every line of his face. He's okay, she said, voice shaking. Nathan knelt beside them, gently brushing Eli's wet hair from his forehead. You gave us quite a scare, kiddo. Eli looked between them, guilt flickering in his eyes. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to help. Maya swallowed hard. I know, but you have to tell us, okay? Promise me. He nodded solemnly. Promise. Nathan's hand found her shoulder, grounding, warm. Let's get you both inside. That night, after Eli was asleep, Maya sat by the fire. Still trembling from what could have been, Nathan sat across from her. 2 mugs of tea cooling between them. You did good, he said quietly. She gave a weak laugh. I was terrified. Welcome to parenthood, he said softly. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the same fear mirrored in his eyes, mixed with something else. Care, protectiveness, maybe even love. I don't know what I'd do if I lost him, she whispered. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. You won't, not while I'm here. The words were simple, but they landed deep. And for the first time, she didn't pull away. Outside, the frost thickened, coating the garden in white. Over the next few weeks, Maya and Nathan worked side by side to prepare the beds for winter. They cut back stems, turned the soil, wrapped the greenhouse windows with plastic. It feels wrong, she said one afternoon, wiping her hands on her jeans. Burying everything we grew. Nathan shook his head. Not burying, protecting, so it can come back. She looked at him, then at the garden. You always find a way to make it sound less sad. He smiled faintly. Maybe because I'm starting to believe it. On the first night, the pond froze. They lit a fire outside, just the 2 of them, bundled in coats. Hands wrapped around mugs of hot cider. Above them, the sky stretched wide and dark. Stars scattered like spilled seeds. You ever think about leaving? Nathan asked suddenly. Leaving? Vermont? This house? All of it? She thought for a moment. There was a time I couldn't wait to. Now I don't know. Every time I look at this garden, it feels like it's saying, stay a little longer. He nodded slowly. I know the feeling. She turned toward him. Nathan. He met her gaze. Yeah, thank you. For giving me this chance. For giving Eli somewhere safe. His eyes softened. You gave it to us first. Something in her chest loosened. A tension she hadn't realized she'd been holding since the day she arrived. When she stood to go, he rose too. The air between them was cold but electric. I'll see you in the morning, she said quietly. Nathan hesitated. Maya, she turned. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, until they stood almost touching. You don't have to go back to the cottage, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Not if you don't want to. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The night held its breath. Then she smiled softly, eyes glistening in the firelight. I'll think about it. He smiled too, the kind that meant he already knew her answer. Inside, as she tucked Eli into bed, she glanced out the window toward the main house, through the frost on the glass. She could see a single light still burning in Nathan's study, and for the first time, the sight didn't feel lonely. It felt like home. The first snow came early that year. It wasn't much, just a thin dusting that powdered the fields and turned the garden paths silver, but it was enough to make Eli press his face to the window, eyes wide with wonder. "Mum, it's snowing." Maya smiled from the stove, ladling oatmeal into bowls. "I see it, sweetheart." Nathan looked up from the kitchen table, coffee steaming in his hand. "Looks like we're officially snowed in." Eli grinned. "Does that mean no school?" Nathan smirked. "It's Saturday, kiddo." Eli considered this, then nodded solemnly. "Still counts." Maya laughed, the sound light and warm, carrying over the smell of cinnamon and coffee. She looked around the room, the fireplace flickering, the frost on the window, Nathan sitting there in his worn sweater, Eli humming under his breath, and realized this was the kind of morning she'd forgotten how to imagine. No rush, no noise, just enough later when the snow thickened. Nathan joined her outside to cover the greenhouse. The world was white and quiet, the kind of quiet that felt alive, not empty. Maya tightened the rope around the tarp, her breath fogging in the cold. "You know," she said, "this is technically your fault." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "My fault? You wished for snow last week." "I heard you," he chuckled. "I said I missed it. That's not the same thing." "Same result," she said, brushing snow from her hair. He grinned, stepping closer. "Then remind me never to say I miss trouble." She looked up at him, their faces inches apart. "It seems to find you anyway." For a moment, neither moved. The world around them fell quiet again, just two people, breath mingling in the cold. The silence between them charged and unspoken. Then Eli's voice broke through from the porch. "Mum, hot chocolate's ready." Nathan stepped back, smiling. Saved by the kid. Maya laughed softly. "You were about to freeze out here anyway." He gave her a look, half teasing, half something else entirely. "You make that sound like a bad thing." Inside, the three of them built a small fire and sat around it, cocoa mugs in hand. Eli told a story about a snow dragon that lived behind the barn, and Nathan listened like it was the most important thing he'd ever heard. When the boy finally fell asleep on the rug, curled under a blanket, Maya lowered her voice. "He's getting comfortable here." Nathan nodded. "So are you." She hesitated. "Maybe too comfortable." Meaning? She took a breath. "I got a call yesterday. From Burlington. There's a teaching position opening in January. It's full-time." He was quiet for a long moment. "And you're thinking of taking it?" "I don't know. I promised myself Vermont was temporary." "But Eli," she glanced at the sleeping boy. "He's happy here." "I can't ignore that." Nathan's voice softened. "Then don't. I have to be practical." He nodded slowly. "Of course," but something in his eyes flickered, the quiet kind of hurt that comes from understanding too much. The next morning, Maya found a stack of lumber by the greenhouse and Nathan hammering in the cold. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Building shelves," he said without looking up. "You'll need them for next spring." She folded her arms. "You don't even know if I'll still be here." He smiled faintly. "I prefer to build like you will be." Her throat tightened. "That's not fair." He finally looked at her, eyes steady. "Neither is pretending we haven't built something worth staying for." The words hung in the frosty air, soft and sharp at once. Maya looked away. "Nathan." He set down the hammer, walking toward her slowly. You don't have to decide today. But if you do leave, she looked up, waiting. I just want you to know, he said, voice low, the garden will still be here. So will I. That night, the snow deepened. Eli insisted they light candles and camp inside. So they built a makeshift tent of sheets in the living room. The fire cast shadows on the walls, the air filled with warmth and laughter. When Eli finally drifted off, Maya lay there listening to the crackle of wood, the sound of Nathan's breathing beside her. She whispered, "You could have told me not to go." He turned his head slightly. "Would you have listened?" She smiled faintly. "Probably not." "Then I'll just say this," he murmured. "You deserve whatever peace you can find. But don't forget, sometimes peace looks like the place you've already built." She felt the words settle somewhere deep inside her. Outside, the wind picked up, scattering snow across the porch. Inside, the candles burned low, before sleep took her. Maya reached for Nathan's hand under the blanket, not out of fear, but because she could. And when he squeezed back, she realized something. Winter wasn't an ending. It was a kind of beginning that only looked like rest. The road to Burlington was long and white. Maya kept both hands on the steering wheel, the windshield wipers whispering a slow rhythm as flakes danced in the air. Eli was with her mother for the weekend. Nathan had stood on the porch that morning, watching her car disappear down the lane, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. She hadn't looked back, not because she didn't want to, but because she wasn't sure she could. The radio murmured low, some old country song about leaving home and the farther she drove, the less it felt like a trip and more like undoing something she'd just started to build. Burlington was grey and busy, the streets wet with slush. The university sat high on a hill, red brick against white sky. She parked, walked in, and for a few hours became someone else, the professional, the woman who had plans and credentials and all the right answers. They liked her. They said they'd call next week. She smiled, shook hands, and thanked them. But when she stepped back out into the cold, she felt hollow. She found herself walking toward the lake instead of her hotel. The air smelled of snow and salt. Ice floes bumped gently against the dock. She stood there until her fingers went numb. Her phone buzzed. A message from Nathan. Eli asked if the snow dragon would find you in the city. I told him dragons only visit places that have gardens. She smiled despite herself, tears burning her eyes. She typed back, "Tell him I'll bring seeds for the dragon when I come home." Then, after a long pause, she added, "If that's okay with you." His reply came a minute later. Always, the drive back felt shorter. The snow had stopped, the sky clearing into pale blue. When she turned onto the familiar road leading to Maple Hill, the air smelled like wood smoke again. The garden lay under its white blanket, quiet and waiting. Eli was on the porch, bundled in his red coat, waving both arms. "Mum," she barely had time to park before he ran into her arms. "You came back," he said, breathless. She laughed, hugging him tight. "Of course I did." Behind him, Nathan stood by the door, smiling, that slow, careful smile that had once felt like distance but now felt like home. Inside, everything was just as she'd left it, the fire burning, the kettle whistling, the faint scent of cinnamon. Nathan handed her a mug. "How was Burlington?" "Cold," she said. "Did they offer you the job?" "Yes." He nodded, waiting. "I turned it down," she said finally. He looked at her, something like relief flickering in his eyes. You sure? She nodded. I realized I already have one. It just doesn't come with a paycheck. He smiled. Does it at least have good co-workers? The best, she said softly. Eli, sitting cross-legged by the fire, looked up. Does that mean we're staying? Maya met Nathan's eyes. Yeah, baby. We're staying. That night, when the house grew quiet and Eli was asleep, Nathan walked her to the garden door. The snow had stopped again, stars scattered bright above them. He turned to her. You know the lilies you planted last spring? They'll come back soon. I know, she said. Everything does, if you give it time. He hesitated, then reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her face. You didn't have to choose this life, Maya. I didn't, she said. It chose me. Then, finally, she kissed him, slow, certain, like the world had stopped needing permission. Outside, snowflakes began to fall again, soft, endless, and new. By March, the snow had begun to fade. It didn't melt all at once. It lingered, soft and stubborn, like a guest reluctant to leave. But beneath it, the earth stirred. The garden, asleep for months, began to breathe again. Maya felt it before she saw it, that pulse in the soil. Quiet but certain. Every morning, she'd step outside with her coffee, boots sinking into the thawing ground, and find new signs of life. The tips of crocuses pushing through the frost, the faint scent of wet earth. Eli followed her, small shovel in hand. Do you think the lilies remember us? He asked one morning. She smiled. Of course they do. We took care of them. Nathan came up behind them, holding 3 packets of seeds. Thought we could add something new this year. Maya took one. Sunflowers. Eli's idea, Nathan said. Eli grinned. They're tall and happy. Like you. Maya laughed softly. Then we'll plant them right by the porch. The days grew longer, the air warmer. Inside. Nathan's new novel sat open on the desk. A story about a woman who plants a garden after losing everything, and the man who learns how to stay because of her. He hadn't told Maya he'd dedicated it to her, but she knew. She saw it in the way he watched her move through the kitchen, the way he lingered before leaving for town, always touching her shoulder, as if to remind himself she was real. Eli thrived. He built forts in the backyard, learned the names of every flower, filled notebooks with drawings of dragons and gardens and stars. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch, he looked at them and said, very simply, We're a family now, right? Maya met Nathan's eyes. Yeah, kiddo. We are. Nathan smiled, sunlight catching the edge of his jaw. Best kind, the kind that grew by accident. Eli giggled. Like weeds. Exactly, Nathan said. The good kind. By late April, the lilies bloomed again. Maya knelt beside them, her hands deep in the soil, and felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The garden was full of color now, purple, yellow, white, and the air hummed with bees. Nathan came up behind her, slipping an arm around her waist. You did it, he murmured. She shook her head. We did. He kissed her temple. Think the garden's done teaching us lessons? Not a chance, she said, smiling. It's just getting started. They stood there for a while, watching Eli chase a butterfly across the yard, his laughter rising like wind through leaves. The moment felt small, almost ordinary, but that was its beauty. That night, as the last of the sunlight spilled over the hills, Maya sat at the table and wrote a single line in her old journal, the same one she'd kept since before she came to Maple Hill. I planted to survive. I stayed to live. She closed the book and looked out the window. The garden shimmered under the fading light, alive, patient, whole, and somewhere inside her, she knew love wasn't the wild bloom that burned too bright to last. It was the root that held through every season, the quiet promise that no matter how harsh the winter, spring would always return.